All right. My name's Maren MacDonald, and my presentation is Anchor Management, AIS Insights in the San Juan Islands. As you take a look at my poster on this first slide here, ponder the question, do you know what goes on the sea floor? Well, I sure didn't before my internship, and I was ignorant and maybe even a little bit scared of the processes, plants, and marine life that exists below the surface, having only experienced them prior in the comfort of a boat above. Hopefully, learning a little bit about more important habitats on the seabed, like eelgrass, can do the same for you and allow us to note what these comforting boating behaviors may be doing to the seabed below. For some background information, I did my summer internship with Friday Harbor Laboratories in the San Juan Islands with research scientists who are interested in eelgrass conservation, where the species Zostera marina is declining. One proposed cause is recreational boating. Behaviors like anchor scour, which are shown on the left side of the figure to the right, where sharp and heavy anchors and chains scar the seabed and uproot plants below. My team was interested in this connection between recreational boating and eelgrass and employed Automatic Identification System, or AIS, which is a vessel tracking system originally designed with safety in mind and frequently relays vessel information like name, latitude and longitude, length, width, and draft, among others, shown below. Researchers can use this publicly available data for marine conservation research, and that's exactly what we did. I asked the question, using Prevost Harbor as a case study, what AIS-derived temporal and spatial recreational boating patterns explain eelgrass decline in the San Juan Islands? Prevost Harbor was one of the 7 bays that I focused on throughout my internship and serves as a case study, which is indicative of larger trends across the San Juan Islands as a whole. It's located on the west here on Stewart Island. With data from Access AIS, we are able to create density maps and time series graphs to address those spatial and temporal concerns and better understand boating activities in areas where eelgrass is present, like Prevost Harbor. At the bottom center here, I have a shout out to Friday Harbor Lab's research assistant, Sarah Da Silva, presenting a poster we created on the use of AIS as a research tool in this capacity to the San Juan County Fair. To focus a little bit more on results, we found when analyzing Prevost Harbor data, as mentioned before, there were trends shown that were consistent with all of the bays we studied. There are peaks in 2020 and 2021 where we found correlation with COVID stay-at-home orders and high boat traffics, where those peaks also led to higher transmission density in following years, especially 2024. Transmissions in this figure show density, meaning in the terms of the length of the stays, because the longer the boat sits on the water, the more time and the more data it's pinging to an AIS, to Access AIS, meaning the more pings per day, more boats and longer stays of each of those boats are out on the water. For a little context for what a transmission might mean, though, we looked at the second bullet on the right, where between 2019 and 2024, over 500 to over 800 boats, unique boats, were captured by AIS within the harbor. Importantly, the pink rectangles on the graph to the left show the growing season, the eelgrass growing season of April to October, and 97.7 of transmissions happen within that period, meaning when eelgrass is at its maximum extent, they're also the most vulnerable. For a different visual angle, take a look at the graph to the left, or the map to the left, which is showing boating occupancy during the growing season in Prevost Harbor over the 6 years we studied. We can see occupancy in the bay is very consistent throughout the years studied. This also means that when there's stress on the eelgrass during the growing season, there is consistent stress. And it also means that the boating patterns are predictable in these bays, making conservation or policy interventions easier. For some context on where the eelgrass is existing in these bays, approximately 55% of all eelgrass in Greater Puget Sound grows below the extreme low tide line, where boats are recreating. As mentioned before, eelgrass is a critical biome, and it's important spawning habitat for Pacific herring, foraging habitat for Dungeness crab and black brant, and nursery habitat for juvenile salmon. Additionally, declines in the distribution of eelgrass reduces plants' ability to sequester carbon, an important process the biome can take part in. Essentially, eelgrass is vulnerable throughout the boating season, and at its most pivotal time, the eelgrass growing season and maximum biomass, peak boating activity is taking place. Tracking these boating patterns can help us identify where boating is most or where eelgrass is most vulnerable, which theoretically aids in recommendations for voluntary no anchor zones, mooring buoy placement, and monitoring locations. So with all that, what's next? We have an ever-growing team now looking at surveying boat owners to identify perception, knowledge, and behavior related to AIS usage, a gap in our current knowledge that can help us better understand boating trends. And additionally, we're expanding on the concept of occupancy zones by developing a quantifiable formula for vessel density, as opposed to the visual aid shown with the occupancy maps before. And it can inform areas of stress of the eelgrass biome. We've also been working with Washington State Parks, identifying supply and demand of their overnight mooring buoys to encourage safe boating practices and mooring practices in state parks. Finally, with those occupancy zone maps I keep referring to, we can propose new areas of eelgrass monitoring for the Washington Department of Natural Resources in areas of high vessel traffic across the San Juan Islands. For example, in this graph on the map to the right, that top arrow is pointing to the Prevost Harbor Marina and boat ramp, where transects of eelgrass have been taken in 2020 and 2019. This map showing the consistency of the boating behaviors towards 2024 might mean a recommendation to continue sampling and see how eelgrass populations have fared over periods of high boating traffic. In summary, eelgrass is vulnerable throughout the growing season. Peak boating activity is concentrated within that growing season, and AIS can help us identify areas of concern for eelgrass populations, examples of which are shown through this Prevost Harbor case study. I'd like to thank my site supervisors, Sandy Wiley Chavarria and Jason Hoden, scholarly advisor Will Patrone, collaborator Friday Harbor Labs research assistant Sarah De Silva, and my friends and family for their support.